the region and the world. Compiled in the Newstalk Radio Newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
Good day with your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. Opposition parliamentarian Sherrod Duncan was yesterday afternoon suspended from the next 4 sittings of the National Assembly. The High Court has ruled that City Hall cannot charge property owners or ask for certain documents before getting compliance certificates. A City clothes vendor was last night stabbed to death. In the region, Prime Minister of St. Lucia has tested positive for COVID. And you'll have your latest international news coming from the BBC.
Advertise with us on Newstalk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. Opposition parliamentarian Sherrod Duncan was yesterday afternoon suspended from the next 4 sittings of the National Assembly because of a raging outburst of anger. The opposition, a Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change, APNU plus AFC, says that Mr. Duncan was moved to anger by local government minister Nigel Darmlow's offensive remarks to female parliamentarians.
You gotta get there, though. That's what you're looking for.
None of the opposition parliamentarians or the House Speaker Manzoor Nadir objected to Mr. Darmlow's remark then, but several minutes later he went into a rage and refused to obey the Speaker's instructions.
Honorable Member Mr. Duncan. Honorable Member Mr. Duncan. Honorable Member Mr. Duncan. Honorable Member Mr. Duncan. Could you please take your seat? Honorable Member Mr. Duncan. Honorable Member Mr. Duncan, I ask that you withdraw. Honorable Member, you withdraw from the House at this moment. Honorable Member Honorable Minister Teixeira, can I get you move the motion under the relevant standing order that this member be withdrawn from the House for the next 4 sittings?
That's what you are. Disrespectful to the House. And the Speaker's condoning you all of the time, Darla. You're going to go for this.
Mr. Nadir then asked Minister of Governance Gil Teixeira to move a motion for Mr. Duncan to be suspended.
Mr. Speaker, based on the behavior of the member and disrespect to you as the Speaker of this House, I move that the honourable member who is not speaking from his seat, he is not in his chair, that he be suspended from the House for the next 4 sittings.
Honourable members, the member is now suspended. Honourable members, I put a motion that the Honourable Member Mr. Duncan be suspended from the House for the next 4 sittings. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The member is suspended.
Governance Minister Gil Teixeira. After more than a 1-hour-long meeting with the government and opposition chief whips, the sitting resumed, but APNU plus AFC parliamentarians refused to continue participating. Minister of Public Works Juan Edgell says the rental of a complex that houses all of the United Nations offices here in Guyana is too expensive. He told the National Assembly that previously The Guyana government had rented 5 buildings, but now one is being rented and there is no value for money.
But when you add the cumulative square footage of all of the 5 buildings that were being used before and compare it to what is being offered now, we are offering the people less and we are paying more. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, there is even no adequate parking for that facility as compared to what existed before.
Responding to questions by Shadow Public Works Minister David Patterson, Mr. Edgell says it will also be too costly to break the rental contract.
But even if we wanted to break this contract and find a better accommodation, which I think eventually the government of Guyana will do, because we should build a proper facility to host all the UN offices. In this contract, sir, if you break the contract, you have to pay the distinguished gentleman who we are renting from 1-year contract. That's the nature of the engagement.
Mr. Patterson asked Mr. Edgell whether he was aware that it was the United Nations that had selected the building and recommended that the Foreign Ministry rent it. In response, the Public Works Minister says that the Guyana government will work to ensure that all of the United Nations agencies are housed in one energy-efficient building because the current rental is too expensive.
If we had invested $5 million US, which we have paid the gentleman, it's $1 billion Ghana, we would have had a facility that we could have been hosting the UN agencies comfortably on a plot of land that is owned by the state. If we continue this rental for 10 years, sir, it's $2 billion. $10 billion, just like that. We are going here over things that we know should not have been done.
The Guyana government says it will this year take steps to draft a new oil revenue sharing agreement to ensure that the country earns more money from the petroleum sector. Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Bharat says that the time has come for a new production sharing agreement, especially since Canadian joint venturers CGX Energy and Frontier recently found oil in another offshore oil block.
Unfortunately, we have not had a discovery in the other blocks of commercial quantity until recently in the quarantine block. So work will have to begin this year on ensuring that we have a model PSA that will bring benefits, that will bring far more benefits to Guyanese than the Stabroek PSA.
Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Bharat. He also says that the more than 30-year-old Petroleum Act will be revised. The High Court has ruled that the Mayor and the City Council cannot charge anyone and submit several documents before they can get a compliance certificate. The Bar Association has since welcomed the High Court's decision, which includes an order for persons who had paid the 0.5% of the market value of the property to get a refund. The law states a certificate of compliance is required for the passing of voluntary conveyances. The High Court states that the charging of the fee and the submission of the 2019 general rates receipt, current market valuation, valid identification card, letter of administration, and death certificate if owner is deceased, agreement of sale, and deed of gift and the affidavit of donor and donee are illegal. A clothes vendor has been killed and the suspected perpetrator has been hospitalized. Police say that 40-year-old Aubrey Beard of Hardina Street, Wortmanville, was killed at about 9 o'clock last night on Hardina Street between Norton and Durban Streets. Police say that a 46-year-old man has since been arrested and is hospitalized under police guard. Eyewitnesses tell police Beard and the accused were seen scuffling in a drain, and as the scuffle ensued, it was further observed that the now dead man lashed the suspect with a piece of wood. The suspect, who was armed with a knife, stabbed Beard to his chest and escaped on a cycle. Police say he was apprehended by public-spirited citizens and subsequently handed over to police. Beard was taken to the Georgetown Hospital, where he later died. 2 suspects are now in police custody following a robbery with aggravation. The 33-year-old man, who is a businessman of Fowles East Coast, Demerara, was robbed on Wednesday on Crowell Street. A phone valued of $49,000 and $700 cash were stolen. After reviewing surveillance video recordings, police say they arrested a 25-year-old man at about 10 o'clock last night at Tugville Housing Scheme. The other man, who is 21 years old, was arrested at about 1 o'clock Wednesday morning at a house on David Street, Kitty. Police say he was found with the victim's cell phone. The businessman told investigators that he was walking on Crowell Street when he was accosted from behind by one of the suspects from in front and the other from behind. Police say the suspects will be charged. Now for the news in the region. Barbados's former Attorney General Adriel Braffett wants the law courts to make a determination on whether the Senate has been properly constituted. The senior lawyer is represented by attorneys Garth Patterson and Michelle Russell, who have filed a constitutional motion seeking the intervention of the Supreme Court to make a ruling on the matter. In a statement released Wednesday afternoon, he contended that the upper house is not fully constituted, with only 18 of the 21 members appointed so far, and therefore the parliament is not fully constituted. However, the former AG in the last Democratic Labour Party DLP administration insisted the move was not politically motivated. St. Lucia's Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre has tested positive for the coronavirus COVID-19. The Prime Minister's office says that he was tested positive during a routine PCR test. In keeping with the public health protocols, the St. Lucian leader is isolated and will continue working from home. According to the statement, the Prime Minister is doing well and exhibits no symptoms at this time. Prime Minister Pierre's full recovery is anticipated within the next few days. Pierre becomes the latest CARICOM leader to test positive for the virus, joining Belize's Prime Minister John Bracino and Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. And lastly, in the region, 2 days after 37 Venezuelan migrants were detained during an operation that led to the shooting death of a 1-year-old boy, a group of migrants who were aboard the vessel spoke to the attorneys to give their version of the events. According to the attorneys, some aspects of the story contradicted the official version given in a Coast Guard press statement on Sunday. The release said that on Saturday night, the TTS Scarborough detected a vessel crossing waters from Venezuela into TT's south coast. The Coast Guard reported that they tried to get the vessel to stop several times using an searchlight and flares without success. Warning shots were also fired, but the vessel continued to try to evade capture. The Coast Guard said the vessel tried to ram a smaller boat deployed by the TTS Scarborough several times, causing the officers to fire shots at the boat's engine to disable it. Speaking with Newsday on Tuesday, attorneys Kristen J. Williams and Sadiq Manzano said after interviewing 3 of the migrants aboard the vessel, there were key differences in their version of events and the Coast Guard's report. Manzano said contrary to the initial report, the migrants he spoke with denied that they attempted to ram one of the Coast Guard's boats and claimed a faulty engine prevented them from trying to escape. Manzano and Williams said they intend to write a letter to the Minister of National Security, the Chief Immigration Officer, and the local arm of the UN Refugee Agency seeking refugee status for the migrants. Williams said the absence of legislation to effectively treat such incidents placed TTT at a disadvantage. And here now is your international news coming from the BBC.
Hello, this is Julie Candler with the BBC News. With Russian forces conducting major military manoeuvres in Belarus and the Black Sea, Britain's Prime Minister has said the crisis over Ukraine is probably at its most dangerous moment. Boris Johnson said intelligence assessments remained grim. Here's our diplomatic correspondent James Landale.
There is a growing sense that the confrontation over Ukraine is coming to a head. The Prime Minister said the next few days would be the most dangerous moment in what he called the biggest security crisis Europe had faced for decades. He travelled to Brussels to discuss what further military support Britain could give to NATO. And significantly, when asked, he did not rule out the UK supporting a military insurgency in Ukraine if Russia were to invade. We will consider what more we could conceivably offer, he said.
The Russian exercises in Belarus, close to Ukraine's northern border, involve tens of thousands of troops. NATO has described them as the biggest in the area since the Cold War. Russia says they're a rehearsal against the threat of external aggression. James Waterhouse is in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev.
There are an estimated 30,000 Russian troops engaging in these military exercises with serious military hardware in response to Ukraine is staging its own army exercises in the north of the country. But it is a growing concern because those 30,000 troops are being added to the estimated 100,000 along an already tense border. So it's doing little to take away the strain from the day-to-day lives of Ukrainians and the anxiety amongst President Zelensky and his government about what the diplomatic outcome is going to be. And it's becoming a lot more pressing as the days go on.
Figures just out show that inflation in the United States hit an annual rate of 7.5% in January, the highest in 4 decades. The Bureau of Labour Statistics said the increases were driven by food, electricity and housing costs. France and Belgium have promised tough action to prevent protests this weekend over COVID restrictions along the lines of those carried out by Canadian truckers. Protesters blocking roads in France are being threatened with jail terms and fines, while Belgium is banning them at the border. Hugh Schofield has more from Paris.
With calls circulating on the internet for thousands of cars to descend on the capital Friday and block road traffic, the prefecture has issued a formal ban on any such show of force. In a statement, it reminds the public that hampering free passage on the roads can be punished by up to 2 years in jail and a large fine. Extra police will be posted on motorways leading into the capital. The protesters are angry at the imposition of the vaccination pass, which makes entry to restaurants, bars and many public spaces conditional on being fully vaccinated. The government says it's hopeful that the vaccination pass can be removed by early April.
World News from the BBC. Emergency workers in Somalia say at least 6 people have been killed and several others injured in a suicide blast in the capital Mogadishu. The Islamist group Al-Shabaab said it carried out the attack. Mary Harper reports.
Al-Shabaab spokesman Abdi Aziz Abu Musab said the suicide bomber targeted a minibus full of delegates involved in the selection of MPs for what he described as the apostate administration. Most of the dead are said to be pedestrians. There's been an increase in attacks in recent weeks as politicians struggle their way through the much delayed, complex and vicious process of selecting a new parliament and president. Security analysts say rival politicians instigate much of the violence, some through their links with al-Shabaab, who carry out killings on their behalf.
An international pressure group says dozens of Cameroonian asylum seekers deported from the US are abused on their return home. Human Rights Watch said some were arrested, tortured and raped. It said their national identity cards were confiscated and their relatives abused. The group said the US was failing Cameroonians with credible asylum claims by sending them back to harm in the country they fled. The High Court in the southern Indian state of Karnataka has said that students should not insist on wearing religious garments, including headscarves, until a final ruling. Judges are considering a petition from female Muslim students who were refused permission to sit in classrooms with their hijabs. They say they're the victims of religious discrimination. The court is expected to rule on Monday. The BBC has lodged an urgent complaint to the United Nations over what it says is Iran's continuing harassment of BBC News Persian journalists and their families in Iran. It's asked for the issue to be raised at the UN Human Rights Council. BBC News.
And that was your latest international news coming from the BBC. Here now is a recap of the highlights. Opposition parliamentarian Sherrod Duncan was yesterday afternoon suspended from the next 4 sittings of the National Assembly. The High Court has ruled that City Hall cannot charge property owners or ask for certain documents before getting compliance certificates. A City Clothes vendor was last night stabbed to death. In the region, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia has tested positive for COVID. And you had your latest international news coming from the BBC. And that was your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/